What is up, Scrub fam? Pat here, back with the blue cards for our Draft Box 5 limited review. This is day 6 in isolation by my account, so hopefully at some point this video series becomes useful to you guys. I know that when regional season resume, that draft is going to be one of the ways that you can qualify for nationals, and I'm pretty sure Draft Box 5 is actually the format for that, so keep that in mind. Before I jump into the video, two things. One, got to give a shout out to the sponsor, Alec Pastron over at beardedcollectibles.com. If you need any sealed product, Alec is going to give you guys the hookup with the best prices, so make sure you check him out. Number two, if you guys are new here, I grade things on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 to 2s are usually basically unplayable. 3 and 4s are niche cards that are basically only going to be sideboard. 5 is a playable. 6 to 7 are decent cards, like better than average cards that you probably should be putting in your decks. 8s and 9s are usually cards that win the game, or are capable of winning the game, or at least preventing you from losing the game in clutch situations. And 10s are cards that are just slam dunk auto wins, and there's very little you can do about it. So with that out of the way, let us go into the blue cards. So blue, unlike red, I think has a really particularly strong theme. Red is based around the 10k vanillas, like we talked about last time. If you guys did miss that video, it will be down in the description below. The link will be there. Blue is based around stacking the top cards of your opponent's deck, and in any other card game besides Dragon Ball Super card game, these cards would be broken. And because we are in limited and not constructed, we are going to be drawing somewhere between 2 and 5 cards a turn based on how your deck is set up. Draft decks, especially since the leader doesn't draw on the front side, are going to be drawing anywhere between 1 and 2 cards per turn, which when many of these cards are looking at the top 3 and rearranging them is absolutely backbreaking. And it's for that reason I think blue is probably the best color in Draft Box 5 for limited. There's one other color that might take that throne, but blue is incredibly strong, so let's get into the actual cards. So first off is Master Roshi Maximum Muscle. Young Badman said that when this card was previewed on Facebook that I would almost assuredly give it a 10 out of 10 because it was so busted. So it is a 25k critical dual attack barrier. When it comes into play, you get to bottom deck 2 of your opponent's battle cards, and at the end of every turn that he is alive, you draw a card. Master Roshi basically runs away with the game, and his only real drawback is that he costs 6. He's just pretty much all around insane. He is just a bomb that will win the game pretty much handily by himself. I don't think I'm quite ready to give it the 10 that Young Badman seems to want me to give it, but I will give Master Roshi Maximum Muscle a high 9. Again, his only drawback is that he costs 6. I do think that there are 2 other cards here in this review that might be more deserving of a 10, so I don't really want to go for a triple 10 here in this video. So yeah, I will give Master Roshi a 9 and be content with that. He's probably the 3rd best card in blue that you can open in this review. Next up is Master Roshi Still Got It. 2 cost 10k is not something I'm super enthusiastic about. Yes, you can discard a card from your hand to give him 5k and draw a card, but the filter effect is largely what I want to be using him for, not for his attacking prowess. And for filter cards, he's pretty overcosted compared to some of the other ones that we've had in previous sets. So I'm going to give this Master Roshi a 6. Next up is Android 17, Turning the Tide. This is one of the cards that we were talking about that I think might be better than Master Roshi. So it is a 7 cost, 30k critical and deflect. His only real drawback is that this card costs 7, because when you play it, your opponent basically loses their hand. Yes, you lose your hand, but the fact is you have a huge beater with critical, which means that you, based on how you drop this and how you sequence your attacks after you drop him, this card is basically devastating and should win you the game on the spot when you play him. The huge critical beater in tandem with, say, a double striker or like a leader swing, and you know, like a 30k vanilla, like there's a number of ways you can just piece together a turn to score a quick 3 damage, and there isn't really anything your opponent can do about it. Android 17 should just win the game as soon as you play him. There's no response that your opponent could possibly have aside from having a blocker already on board to Android 17. He's basically just a snap auto win if you drop him at the right time, and for that reason I'm going to have to give him a 10. Android 18, Never Ending Energy is the next card. Is a 3 cost 20k that draws you 2 cards. If you guys have played Draftbox 4 draft format a lot, you'll know that in the early parts of the game, most players have anywhere between 1 and 4 cards in their hand. Both players are usually starved pretty hard for cards, and it's a game of chicken on trying to force the opponent to awaken first while you're at high life to get you to recoup your life total. So anytime I can play a card early on in the game that will draw me 2 cards, that's a huge deal, especially one with such a sizable body like Android 18. I think this is an excellent pickup, and I'm going to give her a high 8. Next up, we have Energetic Outburst Kale. 2 cost 15k is a nice stat line. It is a playable stat line. That's what we're looking for in the 2-drop slot. And at the when she attacks at the start of your opponent's next turn, you get to untap a mono blue energy, which is pretty nice. Actually, I should say not mono blue. It is any blue. But it is pretty nice to be able to untap an energy. But unlike Constructed, most of the time your hand is filled with a lot of 0-5Ks. Very few 1 cost 10Ks in the set outside of like huge bombs. And a lot of the negates have been rarity upshifted. So it is nice that it actually opens up some energy for you. But I'm not really sure how often you'll be able to use it unless you amass a bunch of negates like the one we'll talk about at the end of this video. So for that reason, I'm going to give Kale a high 6. More often than not, the end tapping of the energy will be largely irrelevant. Next up is Energetic Frenzy Kefla. This is a 25k that normally costs 7, but it can be reduced based on the number of blue battle cards you have in hand. My biggest worry with Kefla is that most of the time you'll be casting her for 5 or 6, in which case then she's just strictly inferior to Master Roshi. And if you're obviously casting her for 7, she's just strictly inferior to Android 17. She feels somewhat win more, right? Because like to get her at 5 cost, you already have to have 2 guys on board, which means you're probably winning the game. That said, this is a really strong rare still. If you can get this down somewhat early, and you're at parity with your opponent, or you're ahead, that she will snowball the game way out of control because you just have too many cards for your opponent to catch you. Still kind of hard to resolve, especially compared to like Master Roshi and 17. For the higher cost, those are going to give you more bang for your buck. And again, it feels like you're already way ahead if you're getting her for cheap. So I'm going to give Kefla a 7. Next up is Hit Deadly Vanguard. This is a constructed bomb, obviously, and it's still pretty good here in draft. The biggest problem with Hit Deadly Vanguard is he is, like Kefla, pretty much a win more card. You're only really going to be using Hit Deadly Vanguard to basically keep your opponent off things when you're already ahead. And when you're behind, a smart player can just look and see, oh, he's got 2 blue and 1 colorless open. He might have Hit Deadly Vanguard and not really commit anything to the board. They're already ahead. They can just pressure what they have, maintain a huge hand size, and you can't really do anything about it. So yes, Hit is really good and impactful, but good players can play around it. And so for that reason, I'm going to give Hit a low 8. Oh, also I should add, insert stance meme here. Next up is Frost Chaotic Burst. It is a 4 cost 20k. When you play it, choose up to 2 of your opponent's battle cards and bounce them to their hand. This card is hard for me to evaluate because if you guys remember from my Dropbox 4 review, I said that Krillin was just an okay common, the blue one, the 4 cost, and he ended up being, after extensively playing the format for about 2 months, he ended up being one of the better commons in the set. And was pretty much a snap pick. I feel like Frost might be the same exact way. Unfortunately, he's uncommon, so it's a lot harder to get multiple copies of him like you could with Krillin. He doesn't cantrip with Krillin. So I'm going to assume that he's probably worse than Krillin, but this is still pretty decent removal, even if it doesn't get rid of the problem permanently. So again, it's hard for me to really rank Frost appropriately. I'm going to give him a high 6 to start, but I think that his ceiling might be higher or closer to a high 7 as the format develops. Just anytime you can get cheap removal on a solid body, it's usually pretty much worth it, and the tempo swing of bouncing 2 guys is a lot better than the standard 1, even though bouncing isn't particularly good. This can create situations where you will run away with the game or you will be able to turn the corner, and that's pretty powerful to me. Next up is Man Bear Pig. It is a 1 cost 4k blocker, and when it is KO'd, you get to switch one of your blue energy to active mode. The auto isn't super relevant. It's largely you're just playing him because he's a 1 cost blocker. So I'm going to give him a 7. You guys know how much I love blockers here in these draft reviews because defense is at a premium and you need some way to stop your opponent from just instantly killing you with a bomb. And this is a pretty decent way to do that. Next up is Purina, Namekian Ambush. 2 cost 15k is great, and it has the upside of having blocker and a removal effect where if they don't prioritize this guy, you get to remove one of your opponent's guys, even though it is a bounce. So again, it's less than desirable. If you guys have played Draftbox 4, you guys already know how good the 2 cost 15k blocker was in blue. And this guy is more splashable because he's only 1 blue pip instead of 2 blue pips. So that is really, really nice. He's just a really solid card, and he's just one of the best turn 2 plays I think you can make in order to preserve your life total. You can just grind the game out with a card like this. So I'm going to give Purina a high 7. These are just really, really good cards to have because your opponent is spending cards. Otherwise, they're never going to get through with their critical leader. It just doesn't allow them to play that grind game that they really want. So that's why these cards are really, really strong. So again, 7 from Purina. Salnell is next, and he is a lot less impressive in my opinion. So he's a 2 cost 15k, which is just very whatever. But he does have this activate main that lets you bounce a guy that's 2 or less. Yes, to get to replay it, and it's super niche. But going first, it actually does have some beneficial upsides. I'm gonna give Salnell probably somewhere between a high 5 or a low 6. He is a playable card, and there are niche situations where he can basically out-tempo your opponent and let you get a huge foothold in the game. But I think that there are better 2-drops in the set, especially in blue, that we'll be talking about shortly. Next up is Foi, Strategic Supremacy. This is basically a constructed card. You really are not going to be drafting or playing with this card at all unless you open either of the Strength of Legends cards, which we'll talk about those when we get to black. If you open one of the Strength of Legends cards, then Foi, Strategic Supremacy is more likely to see play. So I'm going to give this guy a 3. He is basically almost not playable at all in a lot of situations. Actually, it's probably closer to say he's probably like a 2. Unless you open Strength of Legends, then in which case he's closer to like a 7. Because he can, with, depending on how you construct your deck, he can let you pull off that really sick combo. And I think if you pull off either of the Strength of Legends in Limited, you'll basically automatically win. Next up is a Boonie, Afterimage Slash. In my opinion, this might be the best card in the whole set. It's definitely my favorite card in the whole set. 4 costs with Deflect is great. Pseudo Indestructibility creates 4 guys for 4 energy and has the upside of basically untapping 1 every turn. So you might even get 4 guys for 3 energy, one of which is largely indestructible. It's basically you're getting 20k combo power or 4 swings. It's just good on offense. It's good on defense. There's not really much to say about it, Boonie. When both players are low on hand size, if you already have a board, like if you're 2 guys to their 2 guys, and then you drop a Boonie, that's 7 attacks that your opponent has to block in 1 turn to not just die. And that's really, really difficult to do in Limited. So a Boonie just gets a 10 for me. He's just a ridiculous all-star of a card. Next up is Zyom, Lucky Air Raid. It's a 3 cost 19k, which is just okay stats. And then on top of that, he has Activate Main. You can pitch a card. If the top card of your opponent's battle card is a battle card, you get to bottom deck one of those cards. That will most likely happen, but when this card whiffs, that really hurts. Again, remember, hand size is really low in the first 3 to 4 turns of the game when you're dropping this guy. So pitching a card for no return is a huge, huge, huge risk. And then the Activate Battle, while it is really nice, it will most likely never trigger because, again, like 95% of your opponents, their deck is going to end up being battle cards for the most part. Yes, there are cards that let you rearrange it, but this card just feels like too much of a gamble for me to really want to try and go for it. So I'm going to give Zyom Lucky Air Raid a 5. Yes, it is cheap. It is reusable removal, but it is expensive, and the cost associated with the risk is really, really high. And again, since both players are low on hand size, you are trading 1 for 1 most of the time with this guy, and I just don't really feel super great about that. He can be good in some situations, but I feel like he's going to be a miss more often than not. Next up is Liliboo, Wings of Fortune. It is a 2 cost 15k. When you play this card, your opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a battle card, you get to bounce one of your opponent's battle cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. So both of these modes on Liliboo are just good, right? There's not really any downside to playing her. She's just got good stats for her turn, and you're either going to reimburse you a card, which is great, or you get to bounce one of your opponent's guys. Pretty much the only downside to Liliboo is if you get the bounce trigger when they have nothing in play, as obviously the worst thing that could happen to you, right? But it's still a really, really powerful 2-drop, so I'm going to give her a 7. She's just good at every point in the game. Next up is Jirisan, Graceful Wager. It is a 1-cost 4K with counterattack to stack the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and put them back in any order. It's really, really powerful. And then obviously has the activate main of pay 2. Your opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a battle card, they will draw a card. So most of the time you're going to pay 2 to draw with this guy. And then on top of that, you could pay 1 on your opponent's turn to stack their deck. Really important to note, you want to use this when their leader is awakened. So you can play him for 1 in response to your opponent attacking with leader, and then rearrange the top 3 cards of their deck and make it so that the card that they draw off their leader and that the card that they draw for their next draw step are basically useless, and they are not the card that they really want it to be, which is really, really awesome. And then he has the 2 energy sync, which is great. If you guys have played with Android 18 and Dropbox 4, you guys know that paying 2 to draw a card can let you run away with the game really, really quickly. So this guy is just really, really solid for a uncommon. So I'm going to give him a high 7. He is really, really nice and has a lot of utility and upside. Next up is Murachim, Brave Bruiser. This is a 4-cost 25k barrier double strike dual attack most of the time, and that is really powerful, especially with the uncommon slot. It is a finisher on turn 4. Those are few and far between. He can end games basically, and he's hard to deal with, so I'm going to give him an 8. Next up is Abou, Exploitative Flight, another excellent card for this character. It is a 2-cost 15k, and when it attacks or it's removed from the battle area by his skill, so if your opponent uses a removal on it, you get to stack the top 3 cards of their deck. Again, that effect is so backbreaking in draft. In constructed, it's not that good, but in draft, it is absolutely backbreaking because for the first couple of turns of the game, your opponent doesn't draw more than 1 card. They only are going to draw during their draw step. So if you just make it so that they never draw anything good, then they really can't put up a fight. They might not be able to curve out correctly, and that will create an insurmountable advantage that is very difficult to get over. So I'm going to give Abou a low 8. She is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion, as are a lot of the cards that are in this theme. Next up is another Jirisan for Fortuitous Flurry. He has a 3-cost 20k, which is already a good stat line. But when he attacks, if the top card of your opponent's deck is a battle card, you get to draw one, he gets plus 5k. Most of the time that effect will trigger. So this is basically a 3-cost 25k that draws you a card. Again, really, really strong, and this is at common as well, so you will get multiple of these. And it probably should be the turn 3 play that you're shooting for most of the time. So I'm going to give Jirisan, like the previous Abou, a low 8. Next up we have Murasarm, Manipulative Blow, 2-cost 15k. Again, they just really like these 2-cost 15ks in blue. It's just a good stat line. If you have a Universe 10 card already in play, when you play or combo with this guy, you get to stack the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Obviously, you're going to want to play Jirisan or Abou over him first, but he is a pretty good alternative once you already have those in play to be able to combo with this card and stack. So it's another way to trigger a really busted ability. And even just playing this guy as is with nothing in play, he's still a relevant stat line. So I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. He's just good. You're going to obviously prioritize Abou over him, both Abous and obviously both Jirisans, but still a good pickup nonetheless. Now we have Mechiorp, Bobbing and Weaving. It's a 2-cost 15k negate, and then you untap one of your blue energy. So this is 1 colorless. Basically, if you have at least 2 open, you're only paying really 1 colorless to negate and get a 15k on board. Negates are really, really, really good. Obviously, they're better than blockers. They save your life, and this is one of the lowest rarity negates basically in the game, or in this format, I should say. So I'm going to give this guy a high 7. He's not as good as some of the other negates that are in blue. Blue has a lot of negates, like a lot of negates for some reason, compared to other colors, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so good. But yeah, this is an excellent, excellent pickup at uncommon. Next up is E Honda. It's a 3-cost 30k. You guys already know how I feel about these guys. They get the 8 right away. They cost basically 4 cards to block or negate every single time they swing, or it's basically a guaranteed damage. It's very difficult to stop, especially since there's no super combos, and more importantly, there's no Deluge of Power like cards either in the set. So yeah, you're basically just taking this when this guy swings at you. Next up is Blanca. It's a 1-cost 10k. Basically only draft this card if you are in red as well. It basically goes with the 10k skillless theme. There's almost no reason for you to pick this up as the mono blue player. If you are just basically in blue, it's a 3. If you are in the skillless deck, it is closer to a 5. Next up, we have Dhalsim, High Stakes Guardian. It's a 1-cost 4K blocker. Obviously very good, just like Man Bear Pig. But the real kicker is that activate mean. You look at the top card of your opponent's deck. If it is a battle card, he gains revenge until the start of your next turn, which is absolutely nuts. If you guys play Dropbox 4, Chaozu is a revenge blocker, and he's very difficult for a lot of decks to beat because most of the removal is either uncommon or rare. And even if they do have those uncommon or rare removal spells, they usually don't want to spend it on a revenge blocker. It feels really bad, especially when your opponent has like a rare or super rare bomb sitting alongside of it. So he is basically like a lightning rod for removal because your opponent can never successfully get through with their bombs as long as this guy stays on board. So I'm going to give this guy a low 8, possibly a high 7. It kind of depends. He is definitely better than the Man Bear Pig that we talked about before, but you know, I don't know how I feel. He might be like a low 8. I feel like we're handing out a lot of 8s in this video, but that's just because, again, Blue's cards are just so good this time around. Speaking of so good this time around, is Jewison, Manipulative Supremacy. So this is a 1-cost 5K that lets you stack your opponent's deck every single turn. So it's really busted. That basically just ensures your opponent is never going to draw their super rare bombs if you unless you give it to them. Basically, their awaken turn where they draw 2. That's their only real time to be able to actually see 3 cards deep. So outside of that once per game ability to break out of it, this Jewison is kind of insane, and I can't believe he's actually at common. I'm going to give Jewison a low 9 because I think if you go first and you open with this guy, it's really difficult for your opponent to get anything going. It's kind of insane how powerful this guy is for a 1-cost in draft. Next up is Disposed Sonic Subversion. 2-cost 15k is fine, and obviously his ability to draw a card when he leaves the board is also okay. His defining feature, his ability to bounce himself and take a life to bounce one of your opponent's guys that's greater than their energy. He's really nice. For constructed, for limited, for draft, I don't really see that ability resolving, you know, pretty much at all. I struggle to think of cards where you would actually, or times where this would actually trigger. So for the most part, he's just going to be a 2-cost 15k that draws you a card when you leave, which is obviously worse than a common in Liliboo. So this feels like kind of like a dud super. So I'm going to give Dispo a 5. I think that he's really underwhelming compared to a lot of the other supers that you could be opening. He's still a playable card though. Next up, we have Abou, Virtuous Supremacy, is a 2-cost 15k, and when he attacks, you have to look at the top 3 for a god and add it to your hand and place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So obviously, again, 2-cost 15k, I feel like I keep talking about, is a good stat line. We will always play that. It feels like Blue is 2-dropped 15k tribal though. So I don't actually know off the top of my head how many god cards are in the set. What I can tell you is that most of the gods are either Destruction and Angel rares, the DARs, or are super rares, which means that most of the time when this guy swings and does find a hit, the card that you are hitting for is incredibly powerful. So that alone gets him quite a decent score from me. He's probably going to be closer to a high 6 or a low 7. I would definitely slot him into my decks if I have at least 4 or 5 god cards, including multiple copies of himself. So yeah, really, really nice card. Next up is Great Priest, Herald of Deliverance. 5-cost 20k critical is way overcosted in this day and age. Honestly, I'd rather play a 3-cost 20k without critical than pay 5 for a 20 with crit. And then he has this ability where you can pay a blue. If you have 4 more energy, choose 2 god cards in play and return them to your hand to put him into play. So you get to play him for 1. The only time I think you should ever do this is when you are pushing for game, after you've already swung with those 2 previous god cards, because why would you want to set yourself back on tempo to play such a mediocre card? I think Great Priest might end up being the worst SR in the entire set, so I'm going to give him a 4. I probably wouldn't even slot him most of the time. Next up is Dirty Burst, one of the 3 in a row negates that we'll be talking about. So this is a 1-cost negate with the upside of cycling. For those of you guys who don't know, it's like cycling is like you have the ability to just basically get rid of it out of your hand to draw a card. So you almost never use the counterplay of paying the 1 plus the additional blue to draw a card, and your opponent can't attack with 7 or more for the turn. So you're only really using that counterplay effect to draw a card And the other ability is irrelevant because no one's ever really swinging with anything that costs 7 or more unless they somehow have like a really early Kefla, in which case you're probably losing anyway. So yeah, it's basically you can pay 2 to draw a card, or you can just use it as a negate, which is its primary function. It is still a negate, and that means I am going to prioritize it very high. So Dirty Burst gets an 8 for me. Next up is Internal Energy Shift, which I think is a better card than Dirty Burst because it has the ability to situationally guarantee that it protects one of your battle cards. It's basically Whis' Coercion and Vados' Assistance from Series 1 in one card if you get everything correct. Really strong card. So again, I'm going to give it an 8 as an aside. This is one of the cards that you should pick up a playset of for Constructed if you play yellow leaders with blue splash at all, because this will basically be the best negate I feel like going forward for yellow leaders that are splashing blue. And then finally, the last card is Universe 10 Assemble. This card is absolutely absurd for a common. So it is a 1-cost negate, then you get to stack your opponent's deck, and then you get to play a Universe 10 that costs 2 or less from your hand. So just think about it. You can literally negate an attack, play a Lillibut, draw a card, and completely mess up your opponent's next draws from either their leader or for the next several turns. It's actually insane how good this card is. It does pretty much everything you want. It gets you ahead on tempo. It protects your life total. It ruins your opponent's hand. It's really strong. And considering, as you guys already saw throughout the rest of this video, just how powerful many of the cards are from Universe 10 in this set, this can really run away with the game. Like, you can just drop a Lillibut and get the card, or potentially bounce a guy, so you get to 2 for 1. So for 1 energy, you get to negate an attack, stack the deck, play a 15k, and remove a guy. That's all. You get 4 effects for 1. There's also being able to, again, negate an attack, play a 1-drop blocker, and stack the deck. That's also another really powerful effect. There is, there's so many good plays that can be done off of this negate. It's so powerful. And again, I cannot believe this is a common. Most of the assembles are at rare. I can't believe this card is at common. And normally, you guys, if you've watched any of my videos in the past, you guys know I never give negates higher than an 8 because negates traditionally cannot win you the game. They can pretty much only protect your life total, and I have to give them a high score because otherwise how else am I going to convince you guys to prioritize them? Because negates save lives. They win games by saving your life. This is one of the few negates that can win you the game not only by saving your life, but bouncing a bomb and being proactive about it at the same time. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 9. That is unheard of, by the way. I know I already did it with Kawasu, but like giving 9s to commons is absolutely unheard of. If you guys remember my original grading scale, 9s used to be reserved for only SRs. I guess the power creep in this game is getting so high now that apparently even commons and uncommons can just be bombs that absolutely run away with the game. So there you go, guys. That is the blue cards. Join us next time for the green cards. And as always, guys, stay safe. Like, comment, subscribe. Helps us out here a ton. And until next time, I have been tongue-tied. Bye-bye.